Professor Mike Barger, who's our next speaker. I've had the honor of working and teaching with Mike for about the last 10 years. He is a very insightful leader and an all-around great human being. So with that, Mike, it's all yours.
Awesome. Thanks, Dean. Audio sound good?
Yep.
Yeah, that was the double bogey clap. Thanks. There are 3 people there. Got the little, yeah, whatever. Okay. The highly coveted, much sought after post-lunch speaking segment. Awesome. So by way of introduction, just for a little fun, so I grew up in the state of Michigan. I started to fly when I was 7 years old. I went to University of Michigan. I taught flying lessons while I was in school and spent the first part of my professional career flying those. So spent 13 years as a flight instructor in the Navy. Other veterans in the crowd? Vets, thanks for your service. Awesome. I actually ran the Top Gun school for 3 years, not that one. There it is. There we go. There we go. He was actually in the back seat, which is okay, not to spoil the illusion, but the real one. And we could just scrap my whole presentation and talk about the movie if you want. That'd be better, yeah? Right? Okay, well, there weren't enough votes, so we're going to go ahead with the presentation anyway. So spent 13 years doing that. And then life priorities changed a little bit and got together with my brother and a few other colleagues, and we started a little airline you might know as JetBlue. So founder there, was our first pilot, ran operations, maintenance, and the learning function. So got to see the intersection of learning and doing, which taught me a lot about how to help people perform better. And then after 13 years at JetBlue, spent time running an education technology company, and now I've been at the University of Michigan's Ross School of Business for the last 6 years as a professor. Married, 6 kids, 3 boys, 3 girls, 5 of them out of college, 1 of them in college. My 3 boys describe my professional career as a meteoric plummet from coolness. I used to be cool. Now I just teach the family disappointment, but that's okay. I love doing this stuff. Over my career, I've been known by all of these titles. Call me whatever you want. I respond to pretty much anything. Crusher was my call sign in the Navy. And any platform gamers in the room? I spend at least 6 hours a week from 4 a.m. to 7 a.m. on Saturday and Sunday morning playing on my PlayStation 5 with my 3 boys. We are Ghost of Tsushima Legends people. If you see Bandit Slayer 25 out there, you want him on your team. He's pretty good. Okay? That's enough of that. All right. So how to build and sustain a stakeholder-centric learning culture. I am going to share with you 4 ways that I think you can benefit from this. I think you have a good sense of how to build a stakeholder-centric learning culture. I'm going to tell you how you might benefit as a way to help you sustain the efforts that you've already started. And so let's go ahead and get into this. I am going to draw fairly heavily from my time, my 13 years at JetBlue, which was very much a culture-forward kind of an organization. In fact, I'm going to start right out in a minute showing you how we communicated our strategy out to all of our stakeholders, and you will see how centric culture was to what we tried to accomplish. And of course, as a fighter pilot, I am very focused on optimizing performance as well. So those are the 2 kind of elements of this thing that you'll see play out through the presentation. Real heavy emphasis on culture connected to strategy and on optimizing performance. Okay. Here are the 4 ways that I'm going to talk you through this presentation. So benefit number 1, clarity and focus. Benefit number 2, motivation and inspiration. Benefit number 3, evolution. Benefit number 4, resilience. And if we've got some time at the end, like 7 minutes or so, I think we'll be able to get there. I have a top 10 leadership concepts to live by in this VUCA world of ours. We'll get through that nice and quickly. There are lots of slides. I believe in visuals. I will move through them very quickly. You will have access to this presentation when I'm done. Okay? Or now we can go back to the Top Gun conversation. I'll just send you the slides and you'll get all that you need. Awesome. Okay. Benefit number 1, clarity and focus. At some point, if you really are internal stakeholder focused, your people, or maybe you, will be asking your leadership team, hey, what is this organization really all about? Where are we trying to compete? How are we competing? What must we do to win? What do you need from each unit? Those kinds of things. And when I get these questions, I point first to this idea of, well, what is the enterprise strategy? And so I am a big believer in the importance of communicating strategy throughout the organization. Strategy is very important to us because first and foremost, it helps us make choices. You've probably seen the cartoon before. It's kind of cute. I got a couple of these kind of cutesy cartoons in here for you. But it's not, strategy is not just kind of what we're doing. It's also what we're not doing, right? Because ultimately business is about the optimum deployment of finite resources. We can't do everything. We can't be everything to everyone. So it really helps your people focus on what it is that we're trying to accomplish. So here is how we created kind of the JetBlue strategy execution story. Part of my responsibilities at the company is I was our strategy officer. So running the strategy office, I had to help all of the leaders align around the story. Who are we? What are we trying to do? How do we compete? And here's what the story looked like. We built it all around this idea of a balanced scorecard. Balanced scorecard, people? Okay, you can own it. Go ahead, get your hands up there. You'd be proud, balanced scorecard. So back in the late 90s, like 400 of the Fortune 500 were using balanced scorecards. Only about half of those are still using them in some capacity. They are really easy to over-engineer and they can kind of implode on themselves, right? Just because they get so heavy because they're very measure focused. But I do like the idea, if you're unfamiliar with balanced scorecard, of not just focusing on performance measures that look at outcomes, right? Like financial outcomes or customer outcomes. I like the idea of also focusing on the inputs. So how are we executing our processes? How are we committing to and investing in people and tools and technology, those kind of things. So the balanced scorecard concept was basically when you're planning a strategy, you start with financial outcomes, the end in mind. You move to what customers need to get from you so that you can deliver those financial outcomes. You look at the processes you need to execute to deliver those customer outcomes that deliver financial outcomes. Then you need people, tools, learning, growth, those kind of things to execute the processes and so on. So what you see on the right side here is that from a planning perspective, start with the end in mind. And from an execution perspective, you just run it in reverse. Start with the people and tools, execute processes, deliver value to customers, which deliver financial outcomes. Okay, so that was the kind of the foundation of our strategy story. So here is how 90 officers across JetBlue, when I started the company, there were 5 of us. When I left the company, there were 20,000 of us. All 20,000 could basically tell the strategy story, but my job was to make sure that the 90 directors and officers could tell the elevator pitch pretty much the same, and it looks like this. Our job, first and foremost, is to make money. We are a for-profit company, and the way we are going to make money is we are going to increase shareholder value by creating customer loyalty. We want customers who repeat and refer. No magic about that. To get loyal customers, we need to be delivering on these 4 things. Okay? Provide great value, create a pleasant, unique personal travel experience, perfect the JetBlue brand recipe so folks are proud of being associated with our brand. And if they like buying what we have to offer, then expand the network and let them buy more. Okay, to execute those, we need to be laser focused on 3 kind of internal execution themes: drive a low-cost culture, deliver a fresh JetBlue experience, and grow our network. And we start with the best talent and tools in the industry. That's kind of the elevator pitch for what JetBlue does to make money. Okay, that by itself is great that all of the leaders could kind of say that, but is that enough for employees to go out to execute on? Would you say? Okay, what else do they need? Okay, they need the how. So here's what we did. We took that high-level story, we overlaid it on top of a balanced scorecard. So there you see all of the information I had on the previous slide. Okay, you see the 4 balanced scorecard perspectives here. The orange column is the financial perspective, the lens that we look through. The green is the customer, or I'm sorry, the orange. Green is financial. Orange is the customer perspective, the lens that the customers are looking through. The light blue is the process perspective, how we do things. And the dark blue is the what we call people and tools, or members and tools, what the classic balanced scorecard calls learning and growth. Okay, so that's all overlaid there. We then took those kind of main themes in the blue part there. We created objectives out of those, and what you see up there now is a 27 objective strategy map for JetBlue. Okay, every one of those bubbles is a strategic objective, either something that we needed to execute well because it was a table stake in our airline, or something that was a strategic advantage for us if we did it really well. Okay, on top of that, we added our vision statement for the company in the lower right-hand corner, okay, bringing humanity back to air travel. On top of that, we added our 5 company core values, and that gave us the strategy map that we built the first one in 2003 and kind of updated, tweaked that every year until a couple of years ago when I lost track of what they're doing inside of JetBlue because I've been out of there for a while. But this was a very elegant way to effectively connect stakeholders, not just internal stakeholders, but business partners, regulatory partners, those kind of folks. So this got a lot of airtime and was really useful for us. And we emphasized to our people that we created it with the end in mind. So we actually planned it from right to left as you're looking at it, and we executed it left to right. Okay, so everyone in the organization had a good sense of what we were trying to do. We decided, because there are lots of words on this version, that it would be useful for folks to actually see a simple version of this. So back in the early 2000s, the Dummies series of books was really popular. So the strategy office created this, and it was by far the most popular asset that we created out of the strategy office. Everyone wanted a copy of this thing so that they could clearly, understand and explain what it is that we were trying to do as an organization. Okay. So that was all super useful. What else do your people, your internal stakeholders need to execute? So it's great to have objectives and how they fit together. What one more thing would be super extra helpful? Okay, so I heard some procedures, some resources. How about some measures? Okay, so if you are thinking about using this kind of approach, the objectives and the story is really useful, but until you put some measures on things, it doesn't really get real for people. So we added some measures. I know those are really hard to read. You can look at them more closely when you get the slides if you are at all interested. But essentially, every one of these objectives had a measure or a set of measures that went along with them. And this is what helped our employees, what we call crew members, really understand what we were trying to do and how they contributed to what we were trying to do, because they could look at their job and of what they were delivering and where what they were delivering fit on our overall map. We did have an aha moment as we were kind of working through this strategy development, and that was the connection between customer loyalty, which we measured with Net Promoter Score. Any Net Promoter Score users out there? Okay, we find that a really useful measure. Basically, it's the Fred Reichelt, Harvard researcher, said people are overwhelmed with surveys. So is there one question that you can ask people to get a sense of their loyalty? And that one question is, how likely are you to recommend this service, this company, this product, whatever, to friends and family? Okay, 0 to 10. All right. The aha moment for us is that we believed that to deliver customer loyalty, we actually needed to have employee loyalty as well. So we connected kind of our great place to work strategy, how likely to recommend JetBlue as a place to work, to customer loyalty. And there's a whole bunch of research has been done on that, which is really cool. So it was kind of a fun moment of connecting kind of a great place to work to the strategy of delivering great customer experience. So anyway, that's a nice aha moment for us. We also found that using this kind of one-page visual of our strategy was an easy way for us to clearly articulate to our crew members or other stakeholders what are our priorities for the year. Those are the dark blue objectives up there. We also use this as a living dashboard. So on computer screens around the organization, at least one in every location, every office complex, you will see a big TV screen that has this live dashboard on it. Each of the objectives is color-coded. If we're exceeding targets, performance targets, they're blue. If we're on target, they're green. If we're below target, they're yellow. And if we're way below target, they're red. We had an officer in the company assigned to every one of these objectives. So any objectives that went yellow at any time, which meant it fell below target, that executive had that calendar week to report back to the leadership team. This is why it's yellow and when it'll be green again. Anything that went red, that executive had 1 day till the end of that day. Report back to the company, the leadership, this is why this is red, and this is when it's going to be yellow. This is when we expect it to be green. So it's just a nice way to kind of inform everybody of progress and to make sure that we had our eye on the ball. All right. The last thing I'll say about the strategy map, is we also used it to communicate expectations of executive accountability. So post Sarbanes-Oxley, for any of you that remember the early Sorbox days, there was a new requirement that if you were a public company, you had to tell the SEC how you were compensating executives. We pointed right at our strategy map and said, these are the 3 outcomes that we think are really important. These are the 3 inputs that are really important. This is how we're going to evaluate executive performance. So lots of cool things you can do with a strategy map. The question to you, having seen all of that rhetorically, is can understanding your organization's strategy better help your employees execute better, perform better, be safer, be more productive, be more efficient, be more loyal, right? Stay there longer. All of those questions from our perspective were yes. Okay? And that's why we spent time doing that. So benefit number 1 of this kind of stakeholder-centric approach to running a business is you can really generate some great clarity and focus by being clear with your folks about kind of what we're trying to do and what their role is in trying to do it. Okay, is that all right? That was the longest of the 4. Sorry, lots of pictures. Okay, second piece here is about motivation and inspiration. So once you have this strategy, okay, you've got this plan, you've got a set of objectives that fit with challenges you've been given, you've got the scope given your priorities, you've got advantages given the competition. Great execution isn't a certainty, right? Just having the plan doesn't get the plan executed. And so the research that I've been doing at Michigan has uncovered 6 of these obstacles, these barriers that you need to overcome to go from a great plan to great execution. Now, you'll notice the little asterisks up there and the little red type down at the bottom of the screen. This strategy is the word that I'm using here, or plan is what I'm using here. It could be a new strategy. It could be a change initiative. It could be anything. These, if you are trying to do something differently tomorrow than you're doing it today, there are 6 hurdles that you need to clear to get it to run, okay? And here are those 6 hurdles, and I'm going to show you a nice tool that we use to get over the first couple of these things. The first 2 here, the clicker is a little bit on the funky side here. The first one is just understanding. Okay? I do a lot of work with senior leadership teams who have just created a new strategic plan or a new change initiative, and we sit down and they explain the new plan or the new initiative to me, and I ask the softball question, is it safe to assume that the people that need to execute this thing know what you're trying to do? And in almost every case, they look around the room at each other and say, I don't think that's safe to assume. So my free consulting is, why don't you tell them? That would be a really good place to start, okay? The second barrier, once they understand the plan, is do they really buy it? Now, this isn't, do they think it's a great plan? It's more, do they really think that you can pull it off? Do they think that this is the right thing? Do they think that given the other issues that we're dealing with, that this is the thing that we should be focused on? So this whole idea of people buying into the plan is really important, and that's a really delicate topic for leaders, because leaders don't like to get feedback on plans. They just like to give them, right? Send them out in emails. They got the deck. We did a webinar, all right? So here is an interesting question. So how does your leadership team, or how do you and your team collect feedback? It would be great to be able to get in a meeting room and just throw it out there and have people say, here's my concerns about it. The number of times I've had an executive team say, we had a big town hall, 500 people in the room, we stuck some microphones in the middle and we gave them the plan. And then we said, does anyone have any questions? And no one stood up. So they must understand it and buy it. So here is a suggestion for you. These 3 questions are incredibly useful, and I suggest you use them to get a sense from your folks of whether or not what you're trying to accomplish really makes sense and whether they're bought in. And here, and again, whether this is strategy or change initiative or anything, new idea, these 3 questions get to the what, the why, and the why me. Okay. And here is my suggestion for trying to figure out whether you're up at 6 or above on a 7 scale, 4 or above on 4, whatever you like to use. I love this tool. How many Menti fans in the audience? I see a few Menti fans. How many of you have never heard of Menti before? Okay, it's just a polling tool on steroids. So what I would like you to do, if you would be so kind, just as a demo, I don't own the company. I don't have stock in it. I don't get royalties for giving this. If you use Slido, if you use the poll function in Zoom, whatever, this is a pretty cool tool. Go to menti.com for me and type in those 8 digits. And I'm going to ask you these 3 questions. Could we put I'm just giving you a sense of how this works. So think about your own enterprise strategy. Okay. So imagine in your mind what you know about what your enterprise is trying to accomplish, and go ahead and put your information, answer the question. And again, what I like about this tool, if you've never seen this before, is it's a nice anonymous way to just get feedback, right? I mean, sometimes the biggest challenge for us is giving people a chance to kind of honestly tell us what they're thinking. When I do this with different layers of leadership through an organization, what I almost always see is at the very highest level of leadership, we're way over on the right side of this question, the answers. When I get to the next layer, it moves over toward the left a little bit, and then the lower you go in the organization, it kind of moves over. Sometimes we start and the very first set of answers is way over on the left, and that's very indicative of what they've got going on. All right, so this is question number 1. So you get a sense of the distribution there. Can we go to the next Menti page there for me? Okay, and you will see in your, right there in your browser, it should update for you. If it doesn't, you might have to refresh the page. Okay, so question 1 is just, do you understand what we're trying to do? Question 2 is, I think this is the right thing to be doing, right? All right, and you're starting to get a sense here, and just go to the next one. Again, this is not for research purposes. This is just more to give you a sense of how it all works. And this is the I'm all in. All right, so I show you that for a couple of reasons. 1, I do think it's a great way to get some feedback. 2, I do think it's a super tool. So if you use it, great. If you don't use it, give it a try. There's a free version. There's a paid for version. It's not very expensive. In the spirit of finding a mechanism to get feedback from your people, I would say investing in that is probably worth it. All right, so we can get out of this back to the slides, if you will. All right. But that I found is just a really elegant way to in a larger forum or smaller forum, it's fine, get some feedback from your folks. Okay, I think these are really powerful questions. Okay, for those of you that are in the change management, change leadership business, it works just as well in that environment as well. Okay, get some feedback. Okay, and when you see that there's an opportunity to make some improvement, then your people will probably tell you, yes, it would be wonderful to be able to get folks in a room and get some honest feedback. That's really, really hard. Okay, so this is a nice way to get some feedback. Okay, so back to our 6 barriers here. People understand the plan. Great. People are bought into the plan. Awesome. This is great. I think this is the thing we should be doing. Next barrier here is, what levers do you want me to pull? What do you need from the unit? How do we contribute? Right? Where should we focus? Because we have limited resources, we're probably going to have some groups doing a few things that maybe are in the better interest of the team rather than their own team, right? So where do we focus? That's the 3rd one. 4th one, I know where you want me to focus. I know what levers you want me to pull, but my folks don't have the knowledge, skills, abilities, capabilities to do it. Okay, again, another barrier. 5th one is, I know what levers, we got all the tools we need. You haven't given us the keys to do it yet. Give us the ability, give us the authority to do it. And then the last one is, let's make sure that the incentives are all aligned with the authority to do it. It is kind of surprising how many times I've found that folks have all of the first 5 taken care of, but the incentive system is not set up to actually get people to throw the levers they need to throw. Okay, so something to think about. 6 barriers here. These first 3 tend to be around communication. The 4th one tends to be around just KSAs, knowledge, skills, abilities, capabilities, kind of things. The 5th and 6th tend to be around culture. Okay, this works a little bit like Maslow's hierarchy. You might find that your organization has 4, 5, and 6 nailed, but not 1 and 2. You got to start from the left and move right. Got to get 1 first. Okay. Powerful questions. So that's benefit number 2. Motivation, inspiration. Once you have this whole plan in place, you have to find a way to overcome these barriers to get people to execute. All right, 3, evolution. So prior to COVID, this was getting lots of interest in the business world. This business roundtable group of CEOs that got together and said, maybe profitability isn't the end all be all for organizations. Some of you might be feeling this. Maybe you've even heard some of it at your organization. You know who this guy is? Bonus points, a little obscure. You'll know the name though, I think. This is Milton Friedman. Milton Friedman is best known as the father of capitalism. Back in September 1970, he wrote an op-ed in the New York Times that basically said, really the primary responsibility of a business is to make money, right? And so over on the right, that's kind of what he said out of his article, and translated, basically the leadership team works for the financiers, the folks that have given it money, and they should do whatever it takes to get the best return possible for those folks. And that's where it all started, if you're looking for someone to point a finger at. Back in August of 19, though, these 181 CEOs got together and said, there are drawbacks to being singularly focused on just shareholder return. And so we need to do some things a little bit differently. So what they rewrote was this statement to this purpose of a corporation. And in that statement of purpose, they said, well, we need to deliver value to customers. We need to invest in employees. We need to take care of our suppliers and the communities that we work in. And of course, we need to deliver long-term value to shareholders. But really, this, the epiphany here from this business roundtable group meeting was, we need to be focused on more than just shareholders. Now, unfortunately, traction, COVID, and some other, business decision-making and behavior isn't necessarily pushing us down that path, even after all those CEOs signed this thing. But there does seem to be a general movement toward this idea of what we call stakeholder capitalism. And the idea is basically have a sense of kind of where you sit in your ecosystem. Who are those primary groups that find value in their relationship with you? Who are the secondary stakeholders that find value in their interest with you, and find a way to create more value there. Now, for many organizations, this stakeholder capitalism thing might be a bit of a bridge too far. And so we now point to this letter to CEOs written by Larry Fink. Larry Fink is the CEO of BlackRock Capital. BlackRock Capital oversees $10 trillion in assets. Okay? The largest financial services firm in the world. And in Larry's letter to CEOs this January, he said that. Okay? Which got lots of attention out in the business world. It's just, we can't just be about profits. Okay. Quote right out of the article, this is the foundation of stakeholder capitalism, which is a direction that that businesses are now going. So how do you do all of this? How does this stakeholder capitalism thing works? Well, the first is determine who your stakeholders really are. Okay, this is a latest McKinsey and group put out a little kind of an update to this stakeholder ecosystem, laying out a group of stakeholders that are kind of internal to the organization, influencing day-to-day decision-making, another group that's kind of outside the organization that you deal with every day, and then a third layer of stakeholders that influence the environment that you work in. Okay, so once you have a sense of who these people are, learn what their needs are, okay, and start building relationships with them. You can do that. Okay? Start building relationships with them. Have a sense of the ways that you can create value for them. And there are lots of ways other than just goods and services or financial returns. There are lots of things we can be doing to create value for stakeholders. Design and execute a stakeholder-centric strategy. And then finally, develop an operating model that can sustain long-term value of creation for all of these folks. Okay? This is just 30,000 feet high level, thinking about building a stakeholder capitalism approach to business. Okay? That is evolution. That is the third benefit of being focused on a larger collection of stakeholders, is that this is the way business is going. So it makes a lot of sense. And the fourth way not surprising given kind of today's conversation already, is this idea of just resilience. Okay. What we all know and have experienced, especially these last few years, is that the challenges we face are asking a lot of leaders. Here's another collection of kind of real-time kind of challenges we're all dealing with. And it's when I teach crisis leadership at Michigan, I always ask my students, so what are your expectations of leaders? What have you seen from them, of them? And what do your people expect of you in these kinds of interesting, challenging times? I define crisis in that class, since it is a crisis leadership class like this. And I like this definition because the bold items there make it really clear that crisis leadership really is all about kind of change management. You know, in the middle of a crisis, things are going to change, and they're probably not going to change for the better. People don't generally like that very much. So that kind of reminds us that crisis leadership is about taking care of people. And in fact, I'm not so sure if we think about how business operates today, this may feel like how you are going about your daily routines, is that business is basically this. Changes are happening all the time, any of which could ignite a highly energized chain reaction with a distinct possibility of a highly undesirable outcome. And that is just business, the business reality, which just, to me, suggests that maybe leadership is a little bit different than what we might have seen in the past. I'm not suggesting this. This is just something the Dilbert folks thought was worthwhile. Okay, so very important things happen in the corner office, but we are certainly seeing that just as importantly, things are happening out there in the field, right? So getting out there in the field where a lot of you do your work. So there is a pretty reasonable push to get leaders out of the headquarters building and out into the field to see what's really going on out there. New normal or not, this VUCA environment of ours is demanding kind of an awareness among leaders that, first of all, when things are going sideways, people are going to look for leaders for tangible evidence of leadership. Secondly, when they look, they want and they need people that they can trust, that they can believe in, that they have, you know, a sense of hope that you are going to guide us through this thing. And while they don't expect their leaders to be kind of omnipotent or omniscient, right? They don't expect them to know everything or to be perfect, but they do expect them to be visible, courageous, and urgently committed to the best possible path forward. And these red people up there are just stakeholders of all different types with a vastly different set of perspectives. When I introduce this class in school, I start with this photo. Anyone know what this is? Don't say it's a fire. I know that. Yeah, this is Deepwater Horizon. Is that because you remember it or because you're a Mark Wahlberg fan and you remember the movie? You remember that? Yeah. It definitely got lots of press. Was this a crisis, would you say? Okay, sure. Crisis for whom? Okay, for the world. I heard lots of answers out there. Okay, so I just heard BP over there. So yeah, so BP was the company responsible for the platform. They only had a couple of people on the platform. Transocean is actually the company running the platform. They're the ones that had people injured and killed in this. And then anyone remember who built the platform? Okay, good guess. Actually, heavy engineering of Hyundai built the platform. Was this a crisis for Hyundai as well? If your $1 billion piece of gear is on TV looking like that for a couple of months? Sure. So I say all of that just to say sometimes it's really hard to know who these things are crises for. But an easy group or easy groups to think about this being a crisis for are certainly the executive teams of those three organizations. But how about the community members, the employees of those companies, the families of employees, the investors, the channel partners, the customers, the regulators, the media? All of these stakeholders look at a crisis like this. They have unique concerns, unique interests, unique perspectives, and they need different kind of unique levels of care. And that's how I introduce my students in crisis leadership to this idea of how important it is to engage stakeholders and have some trust capital in the bank so that when things do go sideways, you are going to need to draw on that trust capital. And you're not going to want your first conversation with a stakeholder to be amid a crisis. Okay. All right. So this idea of kind of resilience and being prepared to deal with things going sideways is not just limited to the crisis kind of environment. I mean, we all know You've all heard this before, right? No plan withstands contact with the enemy. Okay, so no matter how good our plan is and we hit the go button, someone's going to run into something they didn't expect as soon as you hit the go button. Perhaps you prefer philosopher Mike Tyson here, which is the same general concept. Okay, which is why in the military we spend so much time on this notion of commander's intent, which is just where we want to be at the end of the day, at the end of the week, at the end of the the conflict. And in business, this is why we set out strategic objectives with tangible, measurable KPIs, results indicators, those kinds of things. Okay. For those of you that work in organizations that like to have this very centralized command and control, what we also learned about doing business in the VUCA world is that business does not have time anymore for people to run into things that they didn't expect, send a note back to headquarters, get guidance, let guidance come from headquarters, and then execute. You need to give people a path forward. You need to give them the keys. You need to give them some bumpers and tell them what we're trying to accomplish, objectives, commander's intent, and let them go. Okay? We need to make that happen. All right. Resilient organizations, this whole idea of resilience is not just about, resilience isn't just about bouncing back from something that goes sideways. A good friend of mine behind the little bubble there, Stephanie Ducek, who works over in the EU, has done a lot of research on resilience in organizations. We are all familiar with resilience as this pick yourself up, dump yourself off, and move on, this kind of coping phase. We're also familiar with the resilience being a let's learn from mistakes and do better going forward. What really caught my eye from her work is this idea of resilience also being part of what you do before you find yourself in the middle of a crisis. How can you leverage relationships with your stakeholders so that they can tell you things that are not looking so good and are about to go sideways, or if it doesn't get fixed, could go sideways. This whole idea of leveraging those relationships to be, to prevent issues is a really wise way to think about building relationships with your stakeholders more broadly. So during this kind of normal operations, spend some time engaging with your various stakeholders so they can tell you where they see potential issues in the future. And then, of course, when you're dealing with crises and after you're dealing with crises, engaging with those stakeholders can kind of reinstate or restore that trust capital that you had built up before things. So, so here's a simple model of leadership to think about helping you navigate in this VUCA world of ours. So I'm a Navy guy in an Air Force town talking about an Army leadership model. So I like the be no do Army leadership model. What stakeholders, all stakeholders want to see from leaders during some sort of sideways disruption or crisis is they want to see them be invisible, caring, empathetic, calm, and assertive. They want them to know the vision, the values of their organization. They want them to have some guiding principles for decision making. And then they want to see them doing, they want to see them communicating, they want to see them making decisions, they want to see them taking responsibility, and they want to see them engaging with them. They want a chance to connect with them. Okay. I want to talk for just a second. I think you'll find this helpful, this idea of guiding principles, this having principles that help you make decisions in the context of what we've all been dealing with here with COVID. So whether it's mask, no mask, vaccine, no vaccine, work from home, work in the office, difficult choices, many strong feelings across the board. And so using this idea of guiding principles and shifting the conversation from what has been decided to how we went about making the decision can be really valuable to you. So, so as an example, to this question of returning to the office versus working from home, it's kind of a binary decision. Do we let people work from home? Do we have them, have to come to the office? Here is what one organization used as a guiding principle as they reached out to their employees and said, before we tell you how we're thinking about this or how we've decided on this return to work versus work from home, let us remind you that this is who we are. And you can read through that. And you can let me know who that is, because you know who that is. The green color probably doesn't hurt any. Yeah, so this is Starbucks really, mission. This is who they are trying to be. So when they were reaching out to their folks saying it's time to come back into the stores as we open back up, this is how they started the conversation about how we're processing the decision about bringing you back. You might find the same kind of thought process useful in your organization. At the University of Michigan, at the business school, we were talking about just the kind of safety protocols, masks, social distancing, that kind of thing. So rather than just sending out a note that said, here's our new policy, this is what we sent out first. And what we found is that it really changed the tenor of the conversation, because now it wasn't that binary, I'm opposed to masks, or I believe in masks, or I'm opposed to this thing. It was more, this is how we're going to do it. It also opens the door for, as these things change, we're going to revisit the decision. Okay, we're not being wishy-washy. We're going to base it on this. And as this changes, we're going to revisit. Okay. Awesome. So benefit number 4, resilience. This whole idea of stakeholder-centric leadership will really help you as things go sideways in this VUCA world of ours. They are going to go sideways. It's not kind of an if, but it's a when. And I think you're going to find this approach really helpful, whether it's in the context of managing a disruption or just being a really good business leader. Okay, building relationships with those stakeholders. Okay, so those are the 4 benefits. And since I have almost 10 minutes remaining, here is your bonus material, your top 10 list, 10 leadership concepts to live by. I think you will find these helpful. These are a product of my time at the weapons school as a leader at JetBlue and as a researcher and professor now. Number 10, find 45 minutes a day to read. If you read at an average pace, an average size book, if you spend 45 minutes a day reading, you are going to read 52 books a year. That's a book a week. Here are the books that I read over the last year. I read a lot. I think you find, I think today in this day and age of lots of social media to scroll through, lots of executive summaries of books, I would suggest that maybe you'd find it more useful to actually pick up a book and find some quiet time and go and read it. Now, if you're counting here, there's 51 titles up there, and that's because I took a little time off last year to write my own, which was a lot of fun. And I can tell you as an author, a lot of time goes into trying to create something that we really do believe is useful for you. So my book, for example, was like 3 times as long as it was in the original manuscript, and you just kind of rip things out that aren't vitally important. So, I buy into Socrates' quote here, or if you're a Bill and Ted's fan, then Socrates said this about reading, and I believe it. And so rule number 10. So where do you start? If you're looking for a place to start, 2 suggestions. I think you'll really enjoy these. First one, good friend Tom Peters wrote The Excellence Dividend. It is a spectacular read on just how to deal with kind of business today. He's a leadership guru, worked at, was a principal at McKinsey when they created the 7S framework. So super smart guy. That's a quote right out of the book, which I think is really useful. And kind of the topics that he covers are, how do we ensure excellence across everything that we do? Okay. And a second recommendation, a little bit lighter, easier to read. Good friend of mine, Adam Grant, we were at Penn at the same time, wrote this as his most recent book. It talks a lot about kind of how sure we are about so many things that just really aren't true. And it does remind me a little bit of the old Mark Twain quote here on, it's not what you don't know that gets you in trouble. It's what you know for sure that just ain't so. Okay. And so this is a good place to do that. So rule number 10, find 45 minutes every day to read. Rule number 9, we don't learn from experience. We learn from reflecting on experience. Yes, sometimes we learn from experience, never to do something again. But most of the time, we have to take a few minutes to step back and think about what it was that we just did. So here is a couple of lessons that I learned from my time out at the Top Gun School. Just an FYI, a typical exercise training mission at Top Gun looks like what you see on the right side of the screen. There was a lot of time in the planning, there's briefing, there's some administration, the event itself is like 30 minutes long, and then we come back and we sit down for 4 to 6 hours in guided reflection. Okay, so the students aren't learning from the 30 minutes that they spent in the air. They're learning mostly from the time that we spend unpacking it afterwards. And so some universal truths about learning from experience. The first one is if you don't have a plan, it is kind of hard to assess how you did. Okay, so that's another reason to have a plan to start with. If you wait to debrief, to reflect, and to learn from reflection, you will forget most of what happened. And in a related universal truth, the longer you wait to review how it went, the better you did. The more of a hero you were. Okay, so you gotta find some time right at the end of events as soon as you can to sit down and what did I expect to see? What did I actually see? What do we learn? Okay, so we don't learn from experience, we learn from reflecting on experience. Okay, 8, recognize that we are programmed to see, or we see what we're programmed to see, not what's actually there. And just a couple of things that you've seen before, but are worth just calling up here. Okay, so sorry about the clicker there. So those of you that have seen this before, some of us see the old woman, some of us see the young one. Once we see them both, you can kind of switch back and forth. If you only see one or the other, it's really hard to see the other one. Right. And so when you get these slides, you can take a look if you can only see one or the other, but it's because we're hardwired to see kind of what we expect to see. Another really good example of that is I'm going to put 3 cards up here and you can tell me what the 3 cards are. I'm just going to put them up for a second. Okay, here they are. We can get them to work. Come on, you. Okay, good. There. Hey, that first one was the 10 of diamonds. Okay. And let me go back and do that again. Sorry. Okay, got those? 10 of diamonds. What was the middle one? King of clubs. What was the left one? What is that? That's a jack of hearts. That's a jack of red spades. Okay, and it's to me, if I can get my darn clicker to work right, it's a really good example of just how easy it is in a quick snapshot for our brain to identify something that it should be, but it's not. Okay, so the lesson here is be curious, not judgmental. Okay, be aware of our biases and be really thoughtful about being absolutely certain of something that you saw when maybe it wasn't there. Okay, that was number 8. Number 7, outcomes matter, but they're rarely the whole story. Don't judge decision quality entirely on outcomes. Welcome to the nickel dime game. I'm going to give you a choice. You can tell me to flip the nickel or the dime. If you tell me to flip the nickel and it comes up heads, I'm going to give you $5 million. Come up tails, I'll give you nothing. Or you can tell me to flip the dime. If it comes up heads, I'll give you $10 million. And if it comes up tails, I'll give you nothing. Which would you tell me to flip? Okay, if you're thinking nickel, you're thinking too hard because there must be a trick to this. There's not. You would pick the dime every time, right? Okay, so if we flip them, okay, and the dime comes up tails and we flip the nickel, come on you, and the nickel comes up heads, did we make the right choice? Okay, and the answer is yes, of course we made the right choice. What's really interesting about this little game though, is that why is it that at the end of every performance cycle, that what we do is we sit down with our people and ask them what they did or what they accomplished, not the way they accomplished it. Okay, and in fact, at a lot of organizations I showed this to, they would say the person that chose the nickel and generated $5 million for the company would get a promotion or a raise or special recognition. And the person that chose the dime would get some counseling and some other things when you all agreed that at the decision time, you should have chosen the dime, right? So the moral of this story is that what we want is we want good decision makers over time, which means we have to have a sense of how our people are going about their decision-making process. And so let's make sure that we're rewarding kind of great processes as well as great outcomes, because kind of the decisions themselves may not be the whole story, okay? Which is really kind of what the point of this one is. Now, don't get me wrong, outcomes matter. We're business people, we want good outcomes, but at the end of the day, those outcomes are rarely the whole story. So be smart about how your people are going about their business, not just what they produce. Okay. Number 6, no plan withstands contact with the enemy. Plan A never goes as expected. In the interest of time, I'm not going to read you this little poem that I had for you, because poetry was probably not something you expected to hear at this event. But I will. You will have access to this in the slides. There is a wonderful excerpt from let me go back, John Brown's Body, which was written by Stephen Vincent Benet back in 1928. It's a 15,000 line poem little shorter than the Iliad, a little longer than the Odyssey. The moral of this story, and some of you may have even seen this before, this is a wonderful illustration of the difference between management and leadership. Okay, is that, you know, this kind of summarizes how hard it is to keep soldiers kind of focused on task. And so the moral of this one is that, you know, managers get people to do things by the book and leaders get them to do the right things. Okay, doing things right versus doing the right things. In a VUCA world, we need better leaders. Okay, plans are worthless, planning is everything. That's a Dwight Eisenhower quote, which says a lot about how we need to be prepared. So no plan withstands contact with the enemy. Okay, 5, master the basics to create space for higher order thinking. You won't have time when things are going sideways. So another lesson from the school, you might find this interesting. Typical example of a scenario: defensive patrol around a carrier that's parked off some not so friendly country. When some aircraft threaten the carrier, the airplanes form up. We approach each other at each of the groups of aircraft are flying at about 600 knots. So we're going to approach each other at 1,200 miles an hour of closure, which means we're getting a mile closer together every 3 seconds. Okay? In 1 minute, we go from 40 miles apart where we can barely start to see each other to where people are shooting at each other, we're too close to run away, lots of things going on there. In that 1 minute, there are about 100 decisions that the flight leader needs to make between the time that they start at 40 miles and they get to 20 miles. And the moral of this story is that there is no time for talking about the basics at this point. We need to have all of the basics nailed down. We need to save bandwidth for that higher order thinking. And in a business, in today's VUCA world, we have to make sure our people are prepared to deal with the higher order things, get them the right tools they need to do the basic blocking and tackling. That's the takeaway there. Okay. 4, just having a great plan doesn't guarantee great execution, which is what we talked about earlier. So you already have the detail on this one. The moral of this one is whether you are leading or being led, these obstacles are there and we need to figure out a way to overcome them. Okay. And it's everybody's responsibility. Okay. 3, when you think you've communicated enough during uncertain times, triple the effort. All right. A friend of mine, Jay Walker, did a lot of research on the Ebola crisis down in West Africa, and he wrote back in 2016 what you see on the screen here. And I would love for you to put the COVID umbrella over top of this thing and let me know whether Jay was onto something. Okay, so what does this tell us about our crisis communication responsibilities? Which kind of begs the question, if we're not talking, you know, where do people go to get their information? They go online. Do people really believe what they see online? Here was a USA Today article that was written in January 2020, 9 days after the first case of COVID was reported in the United States. This was the article that came out of, they saw an increase in Google searches for coronavirus, beer question mark. The red arrow at the bottom of the screen, they are not related. So was this a crisis for Corona beer? Well, about 2 weeks after this article came out, some researchers went out and took some pictures in the UK liquor stores, and this is what they saw. Okay, so not just a matter of controlling the narrative, but really owning the responsibility for stakeholder engagement. So, you know, during a crisis, you need to be the one kind of taking responsibility for being the source of the facts as they come in. So you really do have to kind of get out in front of people and be talking to them. Okay, let's see, 2 more items here and we're done. So appreciate your time. Put yourself in the place of most potential to find the right answers. Something we did really well at JetBlue with these principles of leadership. So these were our guiding principles for leaders. One of the principles was encourage initiative and innovation. And we used this idea of collectively searching for the best right answers from this gentleman called DeWitt Jones, who was a National Geographic photographer, had a great story about going to Scotland to take to find a photo for an article that a company was going to put a full page ad in the New York Times. So they sent him here, and this is what he saw when he showed up. And he started to talk to the locals and say, okay, this is not going to work. I need to find a better place to get a better picture. And this was kind of his next picture, which is getting better. This was the next one, which was getting better. He saw when the sun was going down that it was a nice kind of red amber sky. Talked to the locals. They said when it looks like this at night, it generally looks like this in the morning, and there's going to be some mist tomorrow morning. So he got up early and got himself in a good spot, and this was kind of the shot he took in the morning. And this was the final ad for the newspaper, the full page newspaper ad. The moral of this story was that, you know, starting here, ending here, what he kept telling himself is that, you know, there's no one right answer. There's lots of right answers. And how do I continue to kind of push on putting myself in the right position to find the best right answer? And when you are dealing with complex problems, there's rarely just one answer. There's usually a whole bunch of potential right ones. So put yourself in the place of most potential to find the best right answers. And then the last one, which we've already talked about here, in difficult times, perspectives matter, and relationships are really, really important. So in these VUCA times or now that we're in, whether it's the new normal or not, this is what people are looking for. This is what we need to be thinking about. They're all going to require lots of our attention, and relationships really are everything. I hope you found these top 10 recommendations useful. I hope you found the rest of today's information useful. You will see slides that just kind of sum up what we have. I'm going through quickly because we're out of time. Okay. And it's really been a pleasure spending some time with you today. I hope you found this helpful, and have fun the rest of the conference. Take care, everyone.